Model 1897 Trench Shotgun. John Moses Browning designed the improved smokeless-capable successor to the 1893 in 1897, and Winchester listed it for sale that November as the Model 1897. The stronger receiver, slide lock, and takedown construction reflected the shift to 2 3/4-inch smokeless shells as the American market moved past black powder, also known as the Model 97, M97, riot gun, and trench gun. It appeared in multiple grades for sporting, police, and military use. Chambered in 12 and 16 gauge, it is a slide-action shotgun with an external hammer and a tubular magazine rated for 5 rounds, with a 6th in the chamber. Barrel lengths ranged from 20 inches up to 36 inches depending on grade. Riot and trench patterns typically used 20-inch barrels. A simple bead front sight, a perforated heat shield, and a bayonet lug for the M1917 bayonet defined the trench configuration, while the absence of a trigger disconnector allowed slam fire during rapid cycling at close quarters. The U.S. military fielded the Model 1897 in both World Wars, particularly in dense terrain and urban fighting where buckshot and bayonets were practical. U.S. Army and Marine Corps units employed it, and foreign users included Canada, Ireland, the Philippines, South Korea, and the United Kingdom. Winchester produced the model from 1897 to 1957 with about 10,24700 built, and later iterations appeared as reproductions, such as the Norinco 97 and commercial runs marketed by Cimarron. German protests over trench use emerged in 1918, and stories persist of trap shooters assigned to break thrown grenades in midair. Post-war police adoption and continued appearance in surplus and reproduction markets kept the design in circulation well beyond Korea and Vietnam, making it a working artifact rather than a relic behind glass. FP-45. The FP-45 originated in 1942 as a joint psychological warfare committee project to cede occupied territories with a simple pistol, designed in May and rushed into production from June to August. George Hyde conceived a disposable single-shot tool that could be stamped from sheet stock and assembled rapidly at General Motors' Guide Lamp Division, with an official euphemism, flare projector, to obscure its purpose. Often called the Liberator and nicknamed the Woolworth pistol, it is a 45 ACP single-shot Derringer with an unrifled 4-inch barrel and a crude notch for aiming. The action is manual. The breech opens for loading, and a wooden dowel stored with the gun ejects empties. The grip cavity holds 5 spare cartridges. The overall length is roughly 5.5 inches, weight about a pound, and muzzle velocity sits around typical 45 ACP pistol speeds. Approximately 1 million units were produced in about 11 weeks at a delivered cost of only a few dollars each, packaged with comic strip instructions. Distribution went first to Britain, about 500,000 shipped, though far fewer were authorized for handoff to French resistance and later to the OSS, which received hundreds of thousands. Intended engagement distance was measured in feet rather than yards, with effective use at a few paces. Evidence suggests many were never issued, and large quantities were destroyed or dumped post-war, which thinned the surviving population. The simple construction and intentionally limited lifespan reflected the concept, acquire a better weapon from an occupier, not fight extended campaigns with the pistol itself. M1911A1. John Browning's .45 caliber automatic entered U.S. service on March 29, 1911. Incremental improvements standardized in 1926 created the M1911A1, which refined sights, trigger, grip safety, and ergonomics while preserving the core mechanism. The design replaced a patchwork of service revolvers and carried forward lessons about stopping power gathered in the early 20th century. Known variously as the Colt 1911, Colt Government, M1911, and M1911A1. It is a single-action, short recoil-operated pistol chambered primarily in .45 ACP. The standard government barrel measures about 5 inches, with fixed sights and a 7-round detachable box magazine in wartime configuration. Muzzle velocity hovers around the high 800 FPS range with service ball ammunition, and the practical engagement distance sits inside 50 meters. Wartime output during the Second World War reached roughly 1.9 million pistols, with major producers including Remington Rand, Colt, and Ithaca, among others. Pistols carried a parkerized finish with brown plastic grips in later wartime manufacture, and a very small Singer contract lot has become a notable collector target. The pistol served in every theater of the war and found favor among specialized British and American units, including commando and clandestine organizations. Post-war, licensed production and copies spread internationally. Argentina, for example, produced domestic variants after the war, and U.S. service persisted in niche and special operations roles. Later Marine Corps programs such as the M45 MEUSOC and M45A1 kept the pattern in professional use, while the commercial ecosystem grew into one of the broadest in the handgun world. M1 Carbine. The M1 Carbine originated in 1941 to give support troops and paratroopers a compact, lightweight self-loader more effective than pistols or pistol-caliber submachine guns. Standardization arrived on October 22, 1941, and deliveries ramped through 1942 as industry adapted to a major wartime program, officially the United States Carbine. Caliber 30. M1. The family included the folding stock M1A1 for airborne use, the selective fire M2, and the night-fighting M3 fitted with infrared sights. The carbine uses a gas-operated short-stroke piston with a rotating bolt and a 17.75-inch barrel. It fires the 30 carbine cartridge from 15 and 30-round detachable magazines, with muzzle velocity near 2,000 feet per second and practical range to a few hundred yards with aperture sights. Production reached roughly 6.12 million during the war, a vast industrial effort spread across companies more associated with cars, typewriters, jukeboxes, and musical equipment. Inland, Winchester, Underwood, Saginaw, Irwin Pedersen, IBM, Rock-Ola, and others contributed. Issuance favored officers, NCOs, airborne troops, forward observers, and support personnel, and it eventually reached line units as volumes grew. The carbine earned praise for low weight and handiness, with criticism centered on terminal effect in some Pacific engagements. Early sighting arrangements later improved, and the limits of the cartridge against cover. The M2's selective fire and 30-round magazines expanded its role late in the war, while the M3's active infrared sight appeared in limited numbers with short-range night capability. Post-war exports numbered in the hundreds of thousands to Allied nations, and decades of surplus sales and commercial reproductions kept the platform familiar to multiple generations. BAR. John Browning designed the BAR in 1917 for the American Expeditionary Forces, with first issue in 1918 as a portable automatic rifle to accompany infantry during advances. The concept of walking fire shaped early doctrine, though the weapon's role evolved rapidly once units determined sustainable rates and the value of a bipod-supported base of fire. Chambered in .30-06 Springfield, the BAR uses a gas system with a rising bolt lock and feeds from 20-round box magazines. Specialized 40-round magazines existed for anti-aircraft applications. The standard barrel length is 24 inches, with aperture rear and protected front sights graduated for extended ranges. Muzzle velocity sits near 2,800 feet per second with service ammunition, and the effective envelope in the squad automatic roll centered on a few hundred yards. By the late 1930s, the Browning automatic rifle had become the U.S. squad's light machine gun, equipped with a bipod and rate reducer. It was rugged and delivered controllable automatic fire. Though the fixed, relatively thin barrel accumulated heat, the 20-round magazine limited sustained bursts, and the gas system and rate reducer occasionally demanded careful maintenance. Production from 1917 to 1960 totaled about 35154 through a long roster of industrial partners, with wartime assembly touching firms better known for consumer goods. Service extended through the Second World War and Korea, with residual National Guard stocks lasting into the 1970s. Military and police users abroad employed licensed or derivative patterns. Poland's WZE, 1928. Belgium's FN Model D. Sweden's KG M 21-37 and others. While the modern civilian market sees semi-automatic reproductions that recapture the handling characteristics without automatic fire. M1 Bazooka. The U.S. Army introduced the 2.36-inch rocket launcher in 1942, after rapid development under Edward Ewell and colleagues to pair a shaped charge warhead with a shoulder-fired rocket. Soldiers nicknamed it the Bazooka because the long tube resembled a novelty musical instrument from comedian Bob Burns, and the name became a generic label for similar launchers worldwide. The early M1, M1A1, M9 series fired 60mm M6 rockets with a two-man crew and simple ladder or iron sights. Later models adopted improved aperture or reflector sights and magneto-ignition. Claimed effective ranges for early types ran to roughly 120 to 150 yards, though actual employment was closer, while the post-war M20 Super Bazooka scaled to 3.5 inches with markedly greater penetration and a longer effective reach. Launch tubes progressed from one-piece to two-piece designs for airborne carriage. First fielded in 1942, the Bazooka equipped infantry squads, engineers, and ad hoc anti-armor teams, and small batches went airborne or onto aircraft for experimental use. Early rockets suffered from inconsistent propellant and battery ignition issues. German forces captured launchers and developed the Panzerschreck in response, which looped back to influence later Allied improvements. Wartime production of two 36-inch models ran into the hundreds of thousands across the major patterns. Wartime Lend-Lease shipments carried the launcher to Allied partners, including Britain, Free French Forces, the Soviet Union, China, and others. Post-war adoption of the 3.5-inch Super Bazooka broadened global use, with licensed and reverse-engineered copies proliferating for decades. T-20 Garand. Springfield Armory pursued the T-20 program beginning in 1942 to convert the M1 Garand into a selective fire rifle with a detachable box magazine. The project reflected wartime interest in raising a rifleman's volume of fire while retaining the .30-06 cartridge and much of the Garand's familiar handling. Variants included T-20, T-20E1, and T-20E2. The latter recorded in service tests as rifle caliber .30 T-20E2. The rifle paired a modified receiver and feed geometry with 20-round BAR magazines, a heavier BAR-type barrel, an extended forend with an adjustable bipod on the gas cylinder, and a distinctive muzzle brake. The action remained gas-operated, and the selective fire mechanism required careful tuning to avoid runaway cyclic rates. Trials at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Fort Benning, and Marine Corps boards revealed issues that proved difficult to solve within wartime timelines: excessive flash and muzzle blast, rapid heating and cook-offs, and feed reliability challenges tied to magazine dynamics. Small pilot batches were fabricated for evaluation, and an order for 100 T-20E2 rifles supported more exhaustive testing, but the concept did not mature into a standard service weapon before the end of hostilities. Work on selective fire .30 caliber rifles resumed post-war and informed subsequent T-44 development that culminated in the M14. Surviving T-20 series examples reside in institutional collections, These represent the transitional thinking between the World War I self-loader and the Cold War battle rifle. M1941 rifle. Melvin Johnson's semi-automatic rifle appeared in 1939 as a short recoil design with a rotating multi-lug bolt that competed with the Garand. Production began in 1940 and continued through the war in limited quantities, with the design offering a different answer to semi-automatic service requirements at a time when manufacturing capacity was strained. Known as the Johnson M1941, it chambered primarily .30-06 Springfield, though small runs in other calibers existed. The 22-inch barrel, top-mounted 10-round rotary magazine, and provision for topping off with standard 5-round stripper clips differentiated it from the N-block clip system on the Garand. The bolt locked into a barrel extension. The sights were adjustable iron patterns, and muzzle velocity matched the .30-06 service profile. Overall weight hovered around 9.5 pounds with an overall length near 46 inches. The Johnson offered practical advantages, continuous topping up and no ejected clip, but the reciprocating barrel introduced vertical dispersion, the designer never fully eliminated. Bayonet fit upset the recoil dynamics and induced malfunctions. And the rifle's many small, hand-fitted parts complicated field maintenance. Approximately 22,000 were produced by Johnson Automatics, with total serial ranges indicating under 30,000 rifles, despite higher claims in circulation. Limited U.S. Marine Corps use occurred early in the Pacific, including para-marine units, and a Dutch East Indies contract diverted a number of rifles that later entered Marine stocks when the colony fell. Post-war, Argentina produced a copy, and small numbers traveled through surplus channels. The Johnson bolt's geometry echoes in later American designs, through the designer's subsequent work with Armalite and Colt. M3 Grease Gun. The M3 submachine gun was adopted on December 12, 1942, as an inexpensive, rapidly manufactured replacement for the Thompson. Production began in 1943 at General Motors' Guide Lamp Division, and fielding reached frontline units by mid-1944 after tooling, testing, and training. Officially, the United States submachine gun, caliber .45, M3. It fires 45 ACP from a simple blowback, open bolt mechanism, the 8-inch barrel, fixed sights set for 100 yards, and 30 or 32-round detachable box magazines kept the package compact. Cyclic rate sits around 450 rounds per minute, which favored controllability and reduced ammunition expenditure compared with faster-firing peers. The wire stock doubles as a cleaning rod and wrench, and stamped, welded construction reduces parts count and machining. Wartime production totaled about 655,000 across the M3 and simplified M3A1, with the latter arriving in late 1944 as a refinement that removed the crank-style cocking handle and improved magazine loading. Early reliability complaints centered on magazines and cold-weather lubrication, issues that units resolved through revised procedures and parts. The weapon slotted well for tank crews, drivers, paratroopers, and close-quarters roles where size and cost mattered more than refined ergonomics. Post-war use spread into Korea and beyond, with long service in vehicle racks and armories, and international copies such as the Argentine PAM series and Chinese patterns. Occasional 9x19 configurations supported clandestine supply requirements, and depot rebuilds kept the system relevant for decades. Rising M50. Eugene Rising's submachine gun entered production in 1941 as a lightweight .45 caliber weapon built for speed of manufacture. The family included the fixed stock Model 50, the folding stock Model 55, and a semi-automatic Model 60, with a .22 caliber M65 trainer to reduce costs and conserve ammunition. Operating as a delayed blowback, closed bolt firearm with a hesitation lock, the Rising M50 used an 11-inch barrel, open sights, and 12 or 20-round box magazines, with various aftermarket 30-round options appearing later. Weight for the M50 is about 6.8 pounds, and overall length near 35 inches. The M55 shortened that profile with a wire stock for airborne and special applications. Cyclic rates clustered around 500 to 550 rounds per minute. Nearly 12,000 were produced by Harrington and Richardson through the war, with 2/3 destined for the Marines. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard also took deliveries, and Lend-Lease carried the pattern to multiple foreign services. Initial combat use in the Pacific showed closed-bolt accuracy and mild controllability, but field conditions exposed weaknesses, tight tolerances that resented sand and salt, fragile magazines, non-interchangeable hand-fitted parts, and a folding stock on the M55 prone to failure. By late 1943, the Marines withdrew risings from Fleet Marine Force units and reassigned them to rear area, guard, and police roles. Post-war, significant numbers went to law enforcement and state defense forces. H&R produced limited batches in the 1950s, and later commercial assembly moved some receivers through the market. The design remains a case study in how production pragmatism can collide with battlefield reality. If you made it this far, thank you for watching this video. Please give it a like and share it with fellow firearm enthusiasts. And if you'd like to see more content like this, subscribing is always appreciated.